Praise Yahweh. If everybody would go ahead and raise their hands, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. Great, merciful, loving Father, whose holy and righteous name is Yahweh, Father, this is your servant, Kawan Pry Hawkins, Father, along with the men of your house, asking permission, Father, to come before you in unity with the body of priests, through our pastor and overseer, the great Khan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through the authority of your Son, Yahshua Messiah. And Father, we do thank you for another day of life, Father Yahweh, that you've given to us, Father, to be a part of this great work in these last days, and another day, Father Yahweh, to strive to overcome all the weaknesses and shortcomings that we do have. We do pray, Father, that as we go forth this evening, Father Yahweh, in the study of the book of Yisrayl, Father, that you would bless us with wisdom and understanding and knowledge of your plan, Father, and that you'll help us, Father Yahweh, in our efforts in overcoming all sin, so that we can take on your perfect righteous character and be just like you, Father, in every way. We pray, Father, for our pastor and overseer, the great Khan Yisrayl Hawkins, that you would strengthen him and guide him, Father Yahweh, and bless him in this work. Also pray, Father Yahweh, for those who are sick and afflicted, Father, may you heal them completely, Father Yahweh, from the top of their head to the bottom of their feet, Father, so that they may stand and glorify you in heaven, Father. We do love you and praise you, and we do ask these things in the name of your Son, Yahshua Messiah, Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Everybody, please go ahead and be seated. And this evening, men, we're going to be in chapter 8 of the 12th book of Yisrael, part 1, entitled Menorah. And in chapter 8 here, this is chapter 8, it says, the Turkish Bible, 1,500 years old. The real hope is in the book of Yahweh, which is 6,000 years old. And, you know, in the beginning here, in the beginning of this, of this particular chapter here, you know, pastors, you know, he's preparing us because we've got the feast was coming up. I think, I don't remember, there was like 8 weeks or something like that before the feast was set to be there, and this is about the same time that that we began seeing the signs in heaven. You know, the writing in the clouds and the different things that Yahweh had been writing to us to His house. You know, in the clouds. And Pastor told us, you know, and he's telling us that, you know, that these are messages, and he's showing us that these are messages directly from Yahweh, from Yahshua, you know, to His house in these last days. You know, like letters of encouragement, because of the time that we're in. The time that we're in, man, is growing short. You know, as each day passes, you know, we come one day closer to the establishment of the kingdom of Yahweh, to entering into that kingdom. And also, as each day passes, man, that's one less day that we have to overcome. So it's real important that we that we understand the times that we're in, and it's very important that we also, you know, are aware of the deceptions that are in this world. And this is a lot of what we're going to see, here. And as we're going to see here, in the face of Satan. But you know, Pastor, he shows us here, and down here in verse 7 here, he says, he's with us, you know, talking about Yahweh and Yahshua. They're with us. He is with us. We've got the greatest opportunity ever offered to mankind. You know, and if you think about it, you know, the opportunity that we do have, that each and every one of us have, you know, it's never been offered. You know, it won't be offered again. Once these positions are filled, and once those who have qualified for those positions, you know, once those officers are filled, you know, they're not going to be, you know, they're going to be done. The job's going to be closed. Yeah, and you know, Pastor's showing us we've got the greatest opportunity ever offered to mankind, and he says all we've got to do is overcome and endure. You know, and it sounds pretty simple. You know, all we have to overcome. Well, what is it that we have to overcome? You know, to overcome, it simply means to defeat something or someone. You know, it means to overcome, means to defeat them, or to successfully deal with, or to gain control of something, and specifically of something difficult. Or it means to prevail over. And of course, we know we're trying to prevail over the carnal mind. We're trying to prevail over, and we're trying to get that mind, you know, the carnal desires. We're trying to get that all under subjection. You know, we're trying to overcome all the influences that are out here in this world, and there are many. And the influences that are in this world, you know, they're there's nothing righteous about the influences that are in this world at all, except the influences that come from this house and come from the teachings that come forth from Yahweh's house in these last days. But we're shown here we have to overcome. So we have to be able to overcome, this carnal mind, these pulls and these influences, and we have to endure. To overcome it and to endure. And to endure simply means to undergo as a hardship, especially without giving in. And we have to stand for righteousness. We have to stand for Yahweh's perfect righteous character. We have to stand for that and not give in, not turn to the right or the left, because remember, this is how we qualify for this position. This is how we're qualifying for these positions in the kingdom of Yahweh. We're being seen, and we are being allowed to be tested to see if we're going to walk in the law of Yahweh or not. Remember, that's what Moshe told the people. He said, "Do not fear, do not be afraid, for Yahweh has come to test you to see whether or not you will walk in His laws, to see whether you will commit sin or not." And with the incredible positions that is being offered, Yahweh has to be 110% sure, men, that we are not going to turn to the right or to the left. So this is why we have to endure. This is why we have to undergo these things that might seem as a hardship. To remain firm, it's easy to remain firm. It's easy to be in the house of Yahweh. It's easy to keep the Sabbath when you don't have a problem with your employer. You know what? You don't have to worry about coming in on Saturdays. Not a problem. It's easy to keep the Sabbath then, isn't it? How is it when they say, we've got mandatory overtime and it's going to be from now until, now for the next 3 years, you have to come in on the Sabbath. You have to come in on Saturday. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you don't come in, you're fired. The stress starts coming on a little bit then, doesn't it? But what are we going to do? It's easy to do the right thing. It's easy to make the right choices when things are going all well and smooth. But when the suffering and when the hardship comes, what are we going to do under that time of stress? And that's what Yahweh wants to see. How are we going to do? What are we going to conduct ourselves? How are we going to do it? To remain firm under suffering without yielding, and that's what that means, and that's why we're allowed to go through these testings. Look at the testings that Yeshua went through. You look at the testings that he went through and the influences and stuff that surrounded him. But he stood firm and he was rewarded greatly for that. Now, Pastor, he kind of continues here. He says, we have to endure and overcome. If we overcome it and we endure until the end, then we're going to be blessed. Revelation, the book of Revelation, chapters 2 and 3, they go through some of the details and don't really have a whole lot of time to go through that right now, but in Revelation chapter 2, when you look at, say, 2 verse 7, it says, "To him who overcomes, I will give to him to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the garden of Yahweh," to partake in that tree of life. "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the called out ones of the house of Yahweh. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death." They're not going to suffer that. We're not going to suffer that second death. Let me see here. "To him who overcomes, I will give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, a sentence of acquittal." To be forgiven for the foolishness and the sins that we've committed in the past, because we've proved our loyalty to Yahweh and His laws, and proving that we want His way above all else. "To him who overcomes, the same will be clothed with white raiment." Remember what that white raiment is, that wedding garment. The wedding garment of righteousness. So that we can partake of be able to partake of the wedding supper. "And I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his Malachim." So, we have, those things that are going to be given to those who overcome. Now, Pastor, he shows here in verse 9 over here, he says what we're seeing right now, and he's bringing up he's bringing up the news articles, and he's showing here, he says, what we're seeing right now in the news, of course, is we're seeing the face, or we're seeing a face. Is it an actual face that we're seeing? What are we seeing here? He says we're seeing a face, the face of Satan, the face of the dragon, that Scripture calls that old dragon called the devil, called Satan the devil. We're seeing this brought out. We're seeing the deception. The deception is getting stronger and stronger. As Yahweh's house is growing in these last days, as the work is progressing, as the work of Yahweh is taking hold in the world, Satan has to counter that. So the deception is going to get stronger and stronger. You can see as steps are being made and progress is being made in Yahweh's house, you see steps that the Vatican and the Pope are saying. You can see it in the speeches as pastor's been bringing out. We've got to protect we have to protect the children. We have to protect the young. Talking about be wary of changing the hearts and the minds. We don't want to do that. We want to protect them from these evil things is what they're saying. So you can see Satan stepping up her, her progress, stepping up her deception in order to counter the progress that Yahweh's house is making in these last days. But the thing is, man, Yahweh's house is going to prevail. This work is going to prevail. It's proven in Scripture, and we can bet, we can count on that 110%. We're seeing this deception. This deception is getting stronger and stronger. But the word face, we're seeing the face, and the face is more than just the front part of the head that in humans. It's more than just this thing here. It's a lot more than that. The face as a means of identification, and it also, has the meaning of the word. It also has the meaning of countenance. If you remember, in Genesis it talks about Cain's countenance, how it fell. There was an expression that came across his face that revealed something about him, about what he was being told. When a man of Yahweh is corrected, a man of Yahweh, seeks for and welcomes correction. And we should strive to receive correction with joy. And the countenance of Cain, though, the countenance of Cain, it actually fell. He had this look of sorrow. He had this, this long face. This long face came over him. You can see that. You can actually see that. But it's a facial expression of distaste or displeasure. You can kind of see, with that correction. And this is what we see in the world. Whenever anybody's told that they're doing something incorrectly, then they need to make a correction. Nobody likes to be told, that they're doing something wrong. But it means an outward appearance, the aspect of something that is perceptible or obvious upon superficial examination. But this word countenance means a look or expression. But it also, there's a meaning in the word of a semblance is in here. But it says the face as an indication of mood, emotion, and I like this last one here. It says of character. Of character. So what we're seeing here, when we're seeing we're seeing the face in the news. We're actually seeing the face of Satan. We're seeing the character of Satan, and we see it in the in the different news articles that show the sicknesses and diseases increasing. We notice it when we see the wars increase as well. But this semblance, it also has, it uses this word specious, specuous, S-P-E-C-I-O-U-S. And that specuous actually means kind of like an image or likeness. So what we're seeing here is when we're seeing the face of Satan in the news, we're actually seeing the image and likeness of Satan with the events that are going on in the news. We're seeing the end result. We're seeing the result of her character, which is that mixture of righteousness and evil. And we're also seeing deception. And that's what specuous means. Often specuous, specuous. It means having a deceptive attraction or allure, having a false look of truth or genuineness. So we're seeing this deception, and this is what Pastor's showing us here, is we're seeing the deception. The deception is getting stronger. He says, you may have noticed that the Pope is wanting to go see a 1,500-year-old Bible in Turkey. This 1,500-year-old Bible, when you think about it, and Pastor puts it this way, he says, this 1,500-year-old Bible, that brings you back to about 512 CE. And Pastor points out that Constantine reigned and did all of this work by changing the Sabbath, by doing away with the Sabbath, by taking away the name of Yahweh, by taking away the name of Yahshua, by changing those out with the names of gods. That work had already been done. That's already been done. And that had been done back at the time that this Turkish Bible was written. And the Sabbath day had been changed, and Constantine shows that did that back in 325 CE. So this gets you back to 200 years after that. So this one carries the same deception as the rest of them. And what Pastor's showing us is that the deception that's in this 1,500-year-old Bible is the same deception that we see that's built into the King James Version at this time. That mixture, it's still there. But what this does, and part of what this does is when the Pope says, well, I want to go back and see this, or anybody says, I want to go back and see this 1,500-year-old Bible and see, it's actually an illusion. It's an act. It's an illusion of what they're doing. It's an illusion or an act of putting on the pretense of someone actually wanting to try to seek the truth. When you look at the big picture, of what's taking place, as Pastor has shown us here, he's just going back to an earlier version of the deception that is in the authorized version of the Scriptures right now, the King James Version. And he shows us here, he says, all of this is another deception. You see how subtle that Satan is in carrying this out. And he mentions the same thing about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, he says they don't support Christianity. And, Pastor shows that the Catholic Church is in full control of these things. And as they were, the Catholic Church is in full control of it, as they were this 1,500-year-old Bible here that says Jesus predicted the coming of the prophet Muhammad in the Bible found in Turkey. It's been hidden there for a few weeks, he says here. But he says, he says here, he says, this right here is like, they go to extremes to make you think that you don't have something and that it's out there like the missing link between the man and the monkey. So, what we see the extent of the deception here that's taking place. And he shows in verse 14, he says, but this is what they want you to believe, and this is what they teach in all of their schools. The Catholic Church, whenever they set up in a country, they have what they call a concordant, CONCORDAT, which is simply a concordant is simply it's like a treaty. It's an official treaty. It's an official treaty, a compact or a covenant, specifically an agreement between a pope and a sovereign or a government for the regulation of ecclesiastical matters. In other words, it's an agreement saying what the Catholic Church is going to be allowed to do. And Pastor showed here, he said, this is what they want you to believe, and this is what they teach in all of the schools. Well, I have a copy of a concordant here, and this was actually in the agreement between the German Reich and the Holy See, but this was back in July of 1933. But there's 3 different articles in this agreement. And in one of the Article 20 here, it shows that the church has the right to establish theological and philosophical colleges for the training of its clergy. Article 21 says the Catholic religious instruction in elementary, senior, secondary, and vocational schools constitutes a regular portion of the curriculum. So you can see how they actually set it up in a treaty format, where that the Catholic, where they have a foothold in what is being taught. And it is to be taught in accordance with the principles of the Catholic Church. So they actually have it set up in a treaty, in the agreement, with the different governments. And this here again, shows, it just goes to show the how deep the foothold, the tentacles of this beast go. Let's see here. Where do we want to go? Man, time flies, I tell you. But this deception, the deception is continuing to get stronger and stronger. Now, Constantine, if you remember, Constantine, he had a constant fight with the Galileans. Constantine had a constant fight with the Galileans. The Samaritan woman, when Yeshua gave her this message, she went immediately and started gathering people to the house of Yahweh, that is, to hear Yeshua's speeches. Yeshua brought forth the way to keep the Sabbath, the true way to keep the Sabbath. Yeshua taught the law of Yahweh. He set the example. He showed the example of how to properly conduct yourself in the house of Yahweh to receive the blessings that, to receive the benefits and the blessings as he later revealed there in Revelation. But he says that is to hear the speeches. Yahshua brought forth the way to keep the Sabbath, the true way to keep the Sabbath. Well, that made the Pharisees and the Sadducees in Jerusalem angry. Well, why? Why did it make the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, why did it make them angry? Because it exposed them as liars. Because they weren't teaching according to the Scriptures. They weren't teaching according to the law and to the prophets. He showed them how they fell into a life of sin as the prophets showed. And of course, this didn't match up with the governments in Jerusalem at that time. The violent men had taken over these governments in Jerusalem. They had taken over the whole land of Israel, but they couldn't control it because they were trying to issue peace by force. And the force that they were trying to issue, of course, they were trying to, they did it through the many laws. Remember, Daniel talked about the many laws that were written in order to try to enforce peace or to force peace. You can't force peace. You can teach peace, and people have to make the choice whether or not they're going to follow the laws of peace or not, but you can't force it. It has to be something. It has to be done by choice. They pass a law, Pastor shows here, to stop a person from doing a certain thing. Then one of them was to stop teaching anything except tradition. So they actually passed the laws to stop teaching in the name of Yahweh, in the name of Yahshua. They passed laws to stop teaching anything that came from the Scriptures. And then Constantine, he rewrote the Scriptures, and that's when, with the Council of Nicaea, we saw through the missing records of the Council of Nicaea, how two gods were actually combined into one, and you had the god Zeus and the god Zeus and Krishna all merged together, which eventually came out to be Jesus Christ. Well, suffering, there's still suffering that's going on in this world. Pastor shows here about the problems in Samaria, and he's showing that they're practicing righteousness. They're still trying to practice righteousness, but Malachi Martin, remember, he showed in the book The Keys of This Blood that anyone who tries to practice any form of righteousness is going to be, they're going to have war waged against them. And because they're not of Yahweh's house, and they don't have Yahweh's protection. But see, we're protected here in Yahweh's house. We are offered this protection. We have this protection, and we will continue to have this protection as long as we don't do anything to cause Yahweh to hide His face from us. Isaiah 59:1-2 shows us what that is. Sin. If we commit sin, if we practice iniquity and commit sin, Yahweh says that, we turn from Yahweh. Yahweh promises that He will never leave us nor forsake us. Okay, that is a promise that He's given to us. He will never leave us nor forsake us. But when we commit sin, it's us who have chosen to turn our backs on Him. And it's the sin and iniquity that we see that has caused, and Pastor, he mentioned it last week. He mentioned about the weather. How the firmament is just going, it's going crazy. It's out of control. And at the time that this was written, back in 2012, there were severe outbreaks of tornadoes like they'd never seen before. Strong, deadly tornadoes, and strong, deadly storms. And it's all because of mankind's rejection of the law of Yahweh. It's because the firmament has been messed up because of the practicing of sin, of fornication, illegal lust, adultery, bestiality, sodomy, all of those things. They've mutated, and it's caused the firmament to be overloaded, and they can't, the bugs in the air, they can't properly do their job. Remember at the start of this hurricane season, they said, well, this was going to be a more active season than they've seen in a long time. Well, hurricane season just ended. It kind of went out with a whimper because there was hardly anything that was going on. Hardly anything. It was just totally opposite of what they were expecting. So we can see it. Now we see the results again of the of sin, the results of, we're seeing the face when we see, remember, we're seeing the character, the results of the character of Satan. We're seeing the end result of that in the confusion, in the minds of the people. We're seeing it in the confusion in the weather. We're seeing it we see it everywhere, in the news articles. A pastor, he shows here in verse 26 that experience is not the best teacher. He says Yahweh is the best teacher. Remember, he said, "O fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken." Pastor has given us, Pastor has shown us, the scriptures, they give us, in the law, it shows us the benefits and the blessings that come from keeping the law. But it also shows the harm that comes from breaking that law. It's, Yahweh has been proved over and over and over, that His way is right, that what He says will come to pass, is going to come to pass. Remember, fulfilled prophecy proves all things. He continues, and he shows some more about the storms. Shows that they are the face of the dragon. The face of the dragon. They are part of what she is bringing across. It's the result of deception. Deceiving the people into thinking that it's okay to commit sin, that there's nothing wrong with committing sin, that you're not going to bring harm to anybody. But the scriptures show that yes, you will. Yes, it will. And we're seeing the fulfillment of that, even as we speak. And Pastor, he continues here. He covers the, after he's shown here about the face of Satan. We remember the face of Yahweh that was put over the sanctuary. The face of Yahweh. Remember, and that was one of the clouds that where Pastor appeared, in the clouds, and he had the light coming out of his eyes and coming forth from his mouth. And he addresses that here, and he says, this face here, he says, it looks like a talit coming over the sanctuary. He says, covering and going on in each direction, but it actually shows it, the talit. And remember what the talit represents, and it actually shows it, the talit coming from the light of the eyes here. And he says, the sunlight, the light was actually coming through the eyes and through the mouth. And I said, man, this is great, because this means the light of Yahweh, which means the laws. And of course, this looks like a talit, which is the 613 laws of Yahweh. And this is the face of Yahweh that was being seen. Remember that word, remember face, it shows the character. Remember, Yahweh's laws are His character. It reveals His character. Perfectly righteous, brings harm to no one. That's what these laws represent. That's what Yahweh's character brings forth, an attitude of servitude. Not the attitude of selfishness and get what's best for me and who cares about somebody else. That's the face of Satan. That's what we see. It's being taught through the deception that's in the world. But, that's the face of the dragon. But, we're seeing that face of the dragon. That's not we're seeing that. And the articles here, verse 39 shows we're seeing the face of the dragon, what she produces. U.S. troops quickly surge into the Middle East. Well, why? Why are troops going in? They're not going in for a peaceful purpose, that's for sure. Yahshua didn't carry a sword, and He's the one that we're supposed to follow. No, what did Yahshua do? He patiently taught. He stood in His place. He taught the laws of Yahweh. He stood firm. He stood firm in adversity. That man went through, that man went through some adversity. But he stood strong, and he stood there, and he fully qualified for the position that he has now. And men, we can do the same thing, regardless of what comes on, regardless of of how it seems, regardless of how dark it looks. Yahweh is going to protect this house, and He will protect those who stand strong. And this is what we have to do. We have to remember, men, to stand in our place, because the times aren't going to get any easier. The time shows that there's going to be a time of trouble such as never been before, and nor ever will be. But those days, we're going to be rewarded. We're going to be blessed. When we do stand strong, and we'll be so glad that we did. We'll be so glad that we did. And when we successfully get through these trials, even though these trials seem like, We may not understand completely why we're having to go through these things. We're going to be better men when we come out standing on the other side. Because Yahweh knows what's best for each and every one of us. He knows what's best for each and every one of us. He knows what we need. Way better than we do. So men, with that, I'm going to go ahead and I will close here. May Yahweh be with you and bless your understanding. If everyone will go ahead and stand, I'm going to turn it over to the great Kahan, David Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, men. You may be seated. We're going to continue where the great Kahan left off here in chapter 8 of Pastor's sermon from the 12th book of Israel, part 1. This is titled The Turkish Bible, 1,500 years old, but the real hope is in the book of Yahweh, which is 6,000 years old. There's a couple main points I'd like to cover in the second part here this evening. The first point is, Yahweh can promote you in His soon-coming kingdom with what you know and what you learn between now and that time. Is very critical because He can give you positions. He can give you a job in His soon-coming kingdom. The second point I'd like to cover in this portion of the class is that I want to be part of the House of Yahweh. I want the House of Yahweh to judge me. I don't want the world to judge me. And this is the same prayer that King David, he found himself in a situation and he wanted Yahweh's judgment. He didn't want the judgment of the world upon him. In the third point here, the plan of Yahweh has to do with making mankind in Yahweh's own image, and Yeshua was part of that plan, and he is the high priest over the house of Yahweh at this time. The fourth point is a simple statement: righteousness is keeping the laws. The popes and the religious leaders of the world can come up with various different signs and wonders and call that righteousness. But as Pastor continues to point out to us, righteousness is keeping the laws of Yahweh. The fifth point here, get your mind on the work. This work is what is reaching out to the world. So those are some of the main points we'd like to cover here. I'd like to open up, this would be on page 67 of the book. And Pastor starts out here in this portion here. He's talking about a political peace that will of course, this has to do with an article about Kofi Annan and Syria. This was in 2012 here, where Syrian war was, is still going on today, and it was they were seeking a peaceful solution at that time, and they haven't found any, obviously. So, but Kofi Annan was looking for a peace, and Pastor just comments here. He says that a political peace that will, of course, bring forth democracy, like that's setting in Egypt right now, setting up democracy. This is another tool of Satan, Pastor is saying, where you're free from the laws of Yahweh, free to go out and do whatever you want to do. And this is part of the worldly system that we see today. They've got a lot of problems. They're trying to find, through democracy, and they're trying to find solutions, but the solutions are elusive. They're not finding any because they don't have the laws of peace, which are the laws of Yahweh. And another part here talks about an article the Alaska Mosque Center has released. Now, the Alaska Mosque is one of the two mosques on the Temple Mount. This is the working mount. This is the mosque where they worship at on the south end of the Temple Mount. But anyway, they released a statement saying that it has received information that Israel plans to divide up the Temple Mount into separate Jewish and Muslim sections. And the pastor references a peaceful solution to building the next temple in Jerusalem. I just have a copy here to show you, and if you haven't read this, there are copies back on the magazine rack in the sanctuary here. So if you haven't read it, I definitely encourage you to read the peaceful solution to building the next temple in Jerusalem. Then Pastor goes on here, he says, Constantine was a Catholic, and Constantine was a Roman general who convened the Council of Nicene, I believe. Constantine was a Catholic, a Pharisee. The Pharisees were Catholics. They were ruthless men called priests of Jerusalem in Jeremiah. They were sodomites. And we know that the laws of Yahweh condemn sodomy. And Pastor goes on here, they're the ones that destroyed the temple, gave orders to Titus, the great general, who burnt down the temple. He first took everything out of the temple before he burned it. Titus burned the temple in the year 70, I believe, of the Common Era. Constantine, he lived about 325 of the Common Era. So, but these were both Roman generals here, and well before that, they were called elders of Israel. These are the Pharisees. They separated themselves in the days of Samuel, the priest of Yahweh, who was guiding at that time the 12 tribes, who had counselors, righteous counselors according to the laws of Yahweh. Okay, so then Pastor gets into the Turkish Bible here a little bit, and he says one of the things that they said about the Turkish Bible was that it said that Jesus, whom they probably don't even know, his name was Yeshua, but that he was not a god. And so this is a point that's apparently made in the Turkish Bible, showing that contrary to what Christianity teaches today, Yeshua was not a god, so that's a positive thing about the Turkish Bible. He was not a god. Well, that was one thing they had right, of course, Pastor says. Yeshua was not a god, neither is Yahweh a god. Yahweh is our Heavenly Father, our Creator, and our Savior. That was one of the reasons the Pope was wanting to go see the book, because they said that someone had been saying that Yahweh and Yeshua, whom they said God and Jesus were not gods, I don't know of anyone that says that except the House of Yahweh. So, moving on here, and he later found out about the name of Yahweh, and he started preaching this. And Pastor is bringing up a situation of a preacher that he knew who started using the name Yahweh, and but after he started using it, I think it was Herbert Armstrong he's referring to here. But his ties dropped off, so he started using the word eternal instead of the name Yahweh. In Revelation 6, we see the Lamb who qualified, number one, because he's the Son of Man. No, he's not the Son of God. He is the Son of Man. And we all know that, Yahweh said, I will make man in my image, the Son of Man. I will make man in my image, and I will give man authority. And he has authority because he qualified keeping the laws of Yahweh. Then this first point here, Yahweh can promote you in this soon coming kingdom. And he's talking about all of us at any age. He can promote the very young ones and promote all of us. Yahweh can promote you in this soon coming kingdom, and with what you know and with what you learn between now and that time, it's very critical because he can give you jobs. I guess the important thing is that we not waste any time. We not waste anything on things that don't benefit us, don't benefit our character, that don't promote our ability to, or at least Don't waste time on things that aren't beneficial. So, then Pastor goes into here the name of the Samaritan woman. And this was before the Feast of Passover in the year 2012. And we didn't, at that time, yet know the name of the Samaritan woman that met Yeshua at Jacob's well. And so Pastor is getting prepared to give it to us. He says, I'm going to tell you her name at Yeshua's memorial. It's a prophecy that we've got to cry out, that the donkeys are going to cry out. That's what the prophecy says. And if you have your books of Yahweh, you can turn to Yochanan 4, verse 9, and where it reads, Then the woman of Samaria, so you can see this is in the northern part of Israel, in the northern part of the nation of Israel. Then the woman of Samaria, and that was the capital of the ancient Israel, whereas Jerusalem was in the south, Samaria was in the north. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, How is it that you, Yeshua, being a Yadai, ask a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For the Yadaim had no dealings with the Samaritans. And then Pastor, he says the Samaritans, they were, you remember, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You remember those men? They're going to be in Yahweh's kingdom, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then Yeshua met this woman at Jacob's well, just outside the city. That's where the Samaritan woman came to. She was a very poor person, according to history. She made a living carrying water. So you can see that this would be a rather difficult job, especially for a woman, to be carrying pottery with water or buckets of water, however they did it in those days, to and from the well into the city. But that apparently was her source of livelihood, her source of income. The town where they had a well, so the town was probably half a mile or so from there. Try carrying a bucket of water for half a mile. That's what this woman did. She went and got buckets, people's buckets. She went and got buckets or containers. She went to the well and got water. And of course, today we rely on pumps. We don't even think of where our water comes unless it gets cold and things freeze up. Well, then we trace down and we figure out where our water comes from. But water comes from pumps these days. It's pumped out of the ground, or even in the cities. There's a series of pumps that bring water into our homes or dwellings. But back then, they dipped it out of wells. But Pastor's point here is the woman was a worker. She was a worker. This woman was a worker. She went back and forth getting buckets, filling them up, and taking them back to the people. That's how she earned her money at that time. After Yeshua met her, she spent her life bringing people to Yeshua to hear him teach. And this made all Israel angry because of the people that Yeshua was baptizing. The word Samaritan comes from the Hebrew word shimeron. Its root word is shamar. It means to give heed to, observe, to attend strictly, to perform strictly, or exactly, to keep diligently, with the object of this diligence and strictness being the keeping of the covenant, the keeping of the Sabbath. So the word Samaritan actually means the diligent keeping of the Sabbath, giving heed to observe, attend strictly, by keeping the covenant, the keeping of the Sabbath. So keeping the Sabbath, that this woman now in this area this is what it was talking about, the reverence of Yahweh. There's special meaning to the word Samaritan. The reverence of Yahweh, acts of kindness, love, mercy, compassion, the keeping of the laws of Yahweh, the judgment of Yahweh, the appointed times, the word of Yahweh, all have part in the definition of the word, this word Shimmeron, which a Samaritan came from. And here, Pastor says, we've got here, we've got this woman, a diligent worker, a hard worker, and now she's running her legs off, trying to keep up with Yeshua and bringing people to him to be taught by him, and she's doing it diligently. If you, finding joy in our work, Solomon talked about that in Ecclesiastes. You can write down, if I have time, I'll go back and read these later, but Ecclesiastes 3, verses 13 and 22 are great ones, and also Ecclesiastes 5, verses 19 to 20. Solomon came to the conclusion that one of the greatest joys in life is enjoying the work we do. And so I've always thought about that and tried to enjoy my work and find satisfaction and success, and I think that's something we should all. A lot of people in the world think that work is drudgery. Well, it shouldn't be drudgery. It should be something we enjoy doing. And we see the benefit in the work we do. We can, Pastor says, we can gain ground if we start trying to do as this Samaritan woman. Then the second part of this, I want to be part of the house of Yahweh. I want the house of Yahweh to judge me. I don't want the world to judge me. And we want Yahweh's judgment. We want to be judged by Yahweh's laws. We don't want to be judged by the laws of the world. There's a lot of confusion, contradiction, interpretation in the laws of this world, whereas, Yahweh's laws are clear and straightforward, and they're unchanging. In Revelation 6, verse 1, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, one of the four, and this is talking about the quartet, one of the four of the quartet, saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." In verse 2, and I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow and a crown, that is authority. He had authority. Authority was given to him. He went out conquering and to conquer. Now, just because this is a white horse, no, this is not representing righteousness. Because Pastor points out here, this was not Yeshua. It's far from anything that Yeshua would ever teach, to go out with a bow and authority and to conquer. In Revelation 5, verse 6, and I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne, the four living. This, of course, is the quartet, the four living. This is the prophecy now of the quartet. And the scripture continues, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having complete power and complete knowledge and understanding, which signify and represent the complete plan of Yahweh sent forth into all the earth. And Pastor's comment, now this is what Yachanan saw in this lamb who was opening the seal. And Yeshua was given the authority to open the seals, that the prophecies are spoken of in Revelation. In verse 8, and when he had taken the scroll, the four living creatures, that is the quartet, and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Now this is the time period now. It is this time period we're in. We're going to see all of this take place, each one of them having a harp and a golden bowl full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints, just as the prayers of the saints are offered with the incense here when we offer the incense at Sabbath services. The third point here, the plan of Yahweh has to do with making mankind in his own image, and Yeshua was in that plan. In Pastor references here, Daniel 11, verse 31, shows that the army will stand in his part. And in this part of the sermon, he's going into, he's referencing Daniel 7, verse 25, which talks about the Pope and that system of religion. And it says, and he will speak great words against Yahweh. He will wear out, mentally attack, to cause to fall away the saints of Yahweh and think to change the Sabbath and the feast days and the laws. And they were given into his hand until a time, times, and a dividing of times. This is the time period we're in right now. The time, the times, and the dividing of time. And the army stands on his part. Yes, even though the Pope doesn't have an army, he has the governments of the world behind him doing his will. Constantine was one of them, of course, and he's the one that said, we want nothing to do with the rabble of the Jews. What is this rabble of the Jews? In the New World Dictionary of the American Language, Second College Edition, the word rabble means brawling, noisy, a noisy, disorderly crowd, a mob. Okay, that's one definition of the word rabble. It's R-A-B-B-L-E, rabble. The A sound has the short sound, like it's an apple. It's rabble. But the rabble, the dictionary goes on here, the Constantine said, we want nothing to do with the rabble of the Jews. The rabble, it means the common people. That's us. That's us. And it means the common people, the masses, and it's a term of contempt. It's not a term of it's not a compliment. It's a term of contempt. That we want nothing to do with the rabble of the Jews. So rabble means the common people, the masses. It's a term of contempt. So Constantine was talking about the Galileans and the Samaritans, who were working, preaching the same thing, taking this message that Yeshua started. That's the reason the Pharisees could never do anything with the people in Jerusalem, because these people in Galilee were diligent, zealous people for the laws of Yahweh, and they kept spreading the word, like the woman that spread the word about Yeshua. So this word kept spreading in Jerusalem, and that's the reason they could never establish a firm kingdom against the kingdom of Yahweh. Well, they moved to Rome, and then what next? Here came the disciples and the disciples' followers to Rome. Well, of course, they had to start slaughtering these people. And you can read about the persecutions in Rome by the Roman emperors in the book Lost Faith of the Apostles. And that gives a very accurate, detailed description of the persecutions against the believers in Rome and other places. And Pastor gives another reference to this Turkish Bible here, which was 1,500 years old. So this Bible was written around the year 500 of this common era. When we found this Turkish Bible, and it said that Yeshua was not a god, this kind of blows the steam out of it right here. And there's no such thing as the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. That would totally prove that this concept of a Trinity does not exist, or it's false. The Samaritan word, okay, moving on here, it says the Samaritan, this word here, it means they kept the Sabbath strictly. And so they kept it under instruction of Yeshua, and this was what made Constantine so angry. We want nothing to do with the rabble of the Jews, was what he said. But there were Galileans, converts of Yeshua and the 12 disciples. The fourth beast refers to the Holy Roman Emperor, the so-called Holy Roman Emperor. And then we're up to the fourth point here, where Pastor says righteousness is the keeping of the laws, and he's referring again to this Turkish Bible. He says, "Oh wow, what news! This is that the Pope wants to see a 15-year-old Turkish Bible." Isn't that just simply amazing? This has to be righteousness. Righteousness for the Pope to go see this ancient document. No, it has nothing to do with righteousness, because righteousness is keeping the laws of Yahweh. In the next section here, Pastor is talking more about this, the Pope wanting to see this Bible. He says, this Bible here is over 2,000 years old. You need to look at it. It says sin is breaking of Yahweh's laws. It was written by the holy apostles. Now he's referring to the book of Yahweh here. It was written by the holy apostles that you claim was one of yours. Now here he's talking to the Pope. That holy apostle named Kepha, you changed his name to Peter as a dishonor. And he said, you're all like a bunch of pigs that once you're washed, you turn, this is what Kepha's words, you turn to wallowing in the mud. You're like a bunch of dogs who eat something, vomit it up, and then eat it again. You can't get out of that rut. You're like a dog chasing your own tail and around a 15-year-old Turkish Bible. Come back to the truth, the beginning, the laws of Yahweh. I wanted to read 1 Kings 18. Just Pastor's words here directed toward the Pope, and he's been talking directly to the Pope in recent sermons. But I wanted to read 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse 24. These were the words of the prophet Eliah when he challenged the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Ashtaroth. He used a very similar tone of voice and words when he was speaking to them, because these prophets, false prophets, were calling on their God to accept their sacrifice, and there was no response. And Eliah said, "Then you call on the name of your God, Baal, and I will call on the name of Yahweh, and it will be the mighty one who answers with fire. He is the mighty one." All the people responded and said, "What you say is right." So these false prophets agreed that they would do this. Then Eliah said to the prophets of Baal, Choose one bull first and prepare it for yourself, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God. Do not set a fire under it. So in verse 26, so they took the bull provided for them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. And they called, "O Baal, Lord, hear us." But there was no response. No one answered. And they limped around the altar they had made. At noon, Eliah began mocking them. And I see a little I would say Pastor is mocking the Pope here with similar words. At noon, Eliah began mocking them and said, "Cry louder, since he is a god. He must be meditating or busy or traveling. It may be he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they cried louder and gashed themselves with knives and lances, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Of course, they never did get a response, as you can read the rest of the chapter there, because the powers they worship have no strength. So the last thing here, I'd like to just cover with a minute or two I have left here. Get your mind on this work, which is reaching out to the world. Pastor concludes here with a dream that he had, which I'd like to put in your minds here as we conclude class here tonight. He said, "I saw this in a dream." Well, going back, he said, "What you're doing now, you're practicing for the great marriage supper where Yeshua is going to serve you. If you think about it, I saw this in a dream. The room in Yahweh Shema, you know, it was as big as the state of Texas. The measurements of that city, if you check it out, it's huge. But I could see Abel at the far end. If you remember, the far ends, there are several hundred miles that I could see Abel. I could see his face. I could see the servants dashing back and forth, and I could see the faces, every one of them, plain and clear. Clear back to the very end of and the people on both sides. And we were there, brethren. We were there. I want you to put that thought in your minds this evening, the start of the Sabbath. We were there, okay? Let your subconscious mind crunch on that and put that righteous, positive thought, goal, if you will, in your mind, and receive that blessing from Yahweh, this vision from the overseer, that, you know, we will be there at the marriage supper of the Lamb, which is going to be very soon now. So with that, we're going to close for this evening. So if you'd all please stand, we'll close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Yahweh, this is your servant, Kohan David Hawkins, coming to you in unity with the priests of the House of Yahweh through the witness, great Kohan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins, and to our great high priest, Yeshua. We do thank you for the book of Israel and for the class here this evening. We ask that you bless each and every one of us with wisdom, with understanding, with peace and joy, and in the jobs we do in your house, Father, and in building up the house of Yahweh. We ask that you bless each and every one of us on this Sabbath day. Ask you put a hedge of protection around your house and heal those who are sick among us. And we rejoice and ask you, Father Yahweh, to bless the witness, Yisrayl Abel Hawkins, in going forth, preaching and publishing the message, for we know the end is at hand. In all things, we ask for your blessings, and we give you all honor, praise, and thanks in Yeshua's name. Hallelujah, Yahweh.